I have worked at this hotel for over 10 years. Long enough to realize that sometimes even silent walls and corridors can hold onto human memories. The smell of aged wood in the lobby. The echoing footsteps along the damp hallways. The flickering neon lights on rainy nights. All of it creates an atmosphere that regular guests often call heavy. But to me, it had become a familiar part of life. Except for one thing. Room 407. The fourth floor is sparsely occupied. Not because the rooms are uncomfortable, but because of persistent rumors. People say that late at night, you can hear a child crying from room 407, even though it is securely locked. Some guests swear they've seen a shadowy figure behind the window curtains. Management always denies it, explaining that it's just a psychological phenomenon when guests are tired. But longtime staff like me know, there's something not right about that room. And then, there was James. He first appeared on a rainy night 3 years ago. A thin man, in his early 30s, with disheveled hair and a hollow face. He didn't ask many questions, he simply walked to the front desk and requested a room, 407. I remember my heart skipping a beat. Few people dared to mention that room number, let alone request it outright. I cautiously asked, "Sir, there are plenty of other comfortable rooms. That one might be inconvenient." James only looked at me, his eyes tired but determined. "I want that room." With no other choice, I handed him the key. From then on, James became a regular guest. Every few months, he would return, always requesting room 407. He would stay for a week, sometimes longer, rarely leaving. Occasionally, I would find him sitting quietly in the lobby, holding an old notebook, his gaze fixed on the stairs leading to the fourth floor, as if waiting for someone. Other staff began whispering, "James is crazy," or some kind of superstitious fanatic. Some said he was an occult researcher, hunting for haunted places. But to me, I saw in him an undeniable sorrow, a kind of emptiness that made his whole figure seem swallowed by the hotel's darkness. Tonight was no different. James arrived again. Rain poured down, and wind lashed against the glass doors, producing eerie sounds. I was updating the logbook when I heard the lobby door creak open. James stepped in, drenched, his dark coat clinging to his body. "Room 407, he said, his voice hoarse, as if he had been rehearsing that line for a long time. I handed him the key, eyes briefly hesitating. "You still want?" James nodded slightly, cutting me off. He took the key and walked across the tiled floor, his wet shoes leaving long, dark streaks leading to the stairs. I watched him, a vague sense of unease stirring in my chest. At that moment, I had no idea that James's return would set off a chain of events that would make me stop believing in any rational explanation. A few hours later, I was checking the floors as usual. The fourth floor corridor was so quiet that I could hear every breath. The fluorescent lights flickered dimly, casting patchy shadows on the worn walls. As I passed room 407, I paused. The door was slightly ajar, and a thin stream of yellow light spilled out through the gap. In that instant, I heard it, a giggle, childlike, pure, but oddly out of place in the darkness. I startled, goosebumps rising across my body. I stepped back, heart racing, with only one thought in my mind: James was not alone. After James checked into the room, I still felt uneasy. Throughout that night's shift, I kept glancing at the clock, a heavy premonition weighing on my mind. Around midnight, while checking the dining area, I saw James sitting in a corner. There was no food in front of him, only a cup of coffee gone cold. He sat motionless, eyes fixed on the stairs leading to the fourth floor. I stepped closer, trying to make conversation. "Can't you sleep?" James turned to look at me, his eyes sunken, voice barely a whisper. "The little girl hasn't slept yet." Before I could ask anything further, he stood up, leaving the coffee behind, and silently returned to his room. I froze, a chill creeping through me. The next morning, a young housekeeping staff member came running to find me. Panic-stricken, he said that while cleaning the fourth floor corridor, he clearly heard a child singing coming from room 407, a soft lullaby, lasting several minutes. But when he pressed his ear to the door, there was nothing but silence. "That's impossible," I snapped, trying to drown out the fear creeping into my heart. "There's a guest in that room." Maybe he was playing music. But deep down, I knew James didn't bring any device with him. On the second night, as I walked past the corridor, I suddenly noticed room 407's door slightly ajar. Inside, a faint yellow light flickered, and the shadow of a little girl flitted behind the window curtain. I recoiled in panic, but when I looked again, the door was firmly closed. Only absolute silence remained, blanketing the dark corridor. I could no longer be certain. Was James truly alone? After 2 consecutive nights witnessing strange phenomena, I could no longer stay still. Fear mixed with curiosity drove me to investigate room 407 further. This hotel is over half a century old. Before I took over, it had changed ownership many times. Most of the old records were lost, leaving only a few tattered logbooks in storage. One idle afternoon, I decided to go down to the basement and sift through the dusty pile of files. The yellowed pages carried a musty scent. I patiently flipped through the old records until I came across a photocopied news article tucked into a logbook from 1999. The bold headline made me shiver. Tragic family incident at Riverside Hotel, mother and child found dead in room 407. I devoured every word. The article recounted that during that summer, a man named Daniel arrived with his wife and 2 young children for a long-term stay. After a heavy rain one night, hotel staff discovered the wife and their 6-year-old daughter dead on the bed. The father was found hanged in the bathroom. Only the older son survived, disappearing without a trace afterward. The police concluded it was a murder-suicide, attributing it to Daniel's depression and delusions. But the strange part, no one could explain the unusual bruises on the mother and daughter's bodies. As if small hands had gripped them tightly. Reading this, a chill ran down my spine. Could it be James is the older son who survived? That evening, I decided to ask the hotel's elderly caretaker, a man who had worked there since the beginning. Usually taciturn, his eyes darkened immediately when I mentioned 407. "You shouldn't meddle in that," he rasped, his hands trembling. "I was here that year. Trust me, their deaths weren't just accidents. There's something in that room. Something the police never dared to write in the files." I tried to press for more, but he shook his head firmly and walked away, leaving me with a flood of unanswered questions. That night, while I was organizing papers at the front desk, James suddenly appeared. He stood before me, eyes bloodshot, holding an old leather-bound notebook. "You found it, didn't you?" James asked directly, his voice hoarse. I flinched. "What do you mean?" James threw the notebook onto the desk. The pages flipped open, revealing scrawled lines in blue ink. A child's diary. I skimmed it, heart pounding. The shaky handwriting recounted the fateful rainy night. The mother's cries in the bathroom. The screams tearing through the room. At the end was a line repeatedly scratched out. "My sister called my name. But I couldn't." I looked up, meeting James's eyes. In that moment, I understood that all he had been searching for was not only his daughter's spirit, but also the answer to a past long buried. "You know more than you've told me, don't you?" I asked, my voice trembling. James pressed his lips together, silent for a long moment, then whispered, "Room 407 doesn't hold just one spirit. It has trapped all of us, for years." That night, after placing the old leather-bound notebook in front of me, James remained silent for a long time. The dim yellow light of the hotel lobby cast shadows across his hollow face, as if years of torment had drained all life from him. I sat across from him, tense as a drawn bowstring. After several heavy moments, James sighed, his voice breaking as if a part of his burden had finally been released. "My name is James Danielson, 37 years old. I am not a passing guest. I returned to this hotel because it used to be my home." The words sent a chill down my spine. James continued, eyes drifting into empty space as though staring through the old walls. "Over 20 years ago, I lived here in room 407 with my parents and younger sister. I was 16, my sister only 6. That night was the last night I saw my family." He paused, trembling hands pulling the notebook closer, flipping quickly to the later pages. The scrawled lines had darkened, the ink smeared as if soaked with water. "My father was a good man, until he started hearing whispers. At first, he just couldn't sleep. But gradually he became paranoid. He said there was something in this room, taunting him, taking over his mind. James swallowed hard. His voice grew hoarse. I heard my mother arguing with him. Then my sister was crying, pleading. I ran to them, but the door was locked from the inside. I banged, I screamed, and then silence. When the police arrived, it was too late. I held my breath. There was something strange in James's eyes, a mix of rage and despair. How did you escape? I asked quietly. James gave a faint, bitter smile, one that sent shivers down my spine. I didn't escape. I've been trapped for 21 years. Wherever I go, I hear that voice, calling. Brother. He looked straight at me, as if to make sure I believed him. I didn't return to run away. I came back, to hear fully what my sister wanted to say. Only then can I move on. That night, I could not sleep. James's words echoed in my mind. From afar, the empty corridor seemed to sigh. But occasionally, I would hear a faint, childish giggle, soft and innocent, drifting from somewhere unseen. The next morning, when I stepped onto the 4th floor, the door to room 407 was slightly ajar. James sat right by the door, his vacant eyes staring down the corridor. On the floor lay scraps of paper, all filled with childish scribbles. I bent down to pick up one piece. On it were only 3 words. Don't trust him. I startled and looked at James. He remained there, motionless, like a living statue. In that moment, a chilling doubt crept into my mind. Was James the victim? Or was he the one who had been hiding a horrifying truth from 20 years ago? That night, the hotel was shrouded in a heavy silence. The clock had just struck midnight, and the wind whistling through the corridor window cracks sounded like someone whispering. I sat at the front desk, trying to stay awake with a cold cup of coffee. Suddenly, the telephone rang. The screen displayed the calling number, 407. I froze. That room had been locked for a long time. Only James was temporarily staying there. My hands trembling, I picked up the receiver. On the other end came a small, broken voice. Brother. I immediately hung up. My heart pounded violently, cold sweat running down my spine. About an hour later, the night shift staff member, Lucy, rushed down to the lobby. Her face was pale, eyes wide with panic. Boss, I just heard a child crying in the linen room. But when I opened the door, there was no one. The blankets and pillows were torn to shreds, scattered across the floor. Lucy was practical, not easily frightened by ghost stories. Seeing her trembling like that, I knew something truly unusual was happening. Before I could reassure her, James appeared at the end of the corridor. He walked slowly, eyes vacant, as if tracking a sound only he could hear. She's calling me, James whispered, then turned to me. You heard it, didn't you? My sister isn't just showing herself to me. Now, she wants everyone to witness it. I decided to follow James up to the 4th floor. Lucy hesitated, but ultimately stayed close behind. When we reached room 407, the previously locked door creaked open slowly. Inside, dim light from a yellow lamp flickered across the walls. What made my blood run cold were the small handprints smeared in blood, layered atop one another, stretching from floor to ceiling. Lucy let out a soft scream, clutching me tightly. James, however, stepped forward almost entranced. He reached out to touch the marks, murmuring, Sister, I have returned. At that moment, a cold gust of wind swept through the room. The window burst open, curtains fluttering wildly. In the bathroom mirror at the far end, the silhouette of a small girl appeared, her long, tangled hair obscuring her face. Lucy fainted on the spot. I shouted, James, get out now. But James remained frozen, eyes fixed on the mirror. In that gaze, I recognized not only pain, but a strange, hypnotic pull, as if he was willingly being drawn in. When I lunged to pull James away, the mirror suddenly cracked. A voice echoed throughout the room, piercing and coming from all directions. Don't trust him. It was the same child's voice I had heard on the phone. But this time, it rang out clearly, full of resentment. James clutched his head and screamed, collapsing to his knees. I barely had time to drag Lucy out. The door of room 407 slammed shut behind us, locking as if it had never been opened. Inside, James's cries blended with the child's laughter, and then, Silence. After the horrifying night in room 407, I no longer dared to step onto the fourth floor. But just as I tried to stay away, the hotel's ghosts began appearing everywhere. The next morning, when I went down to the kitchen, the head chef looked pale and trembling. He told me he had just seen a little girl in a white dress standing inside the freezer room. He thought she might be a lost guest's child and stepped closer, but in the blink of an eye, the tiny figure vanished, leaving a thicker than usual layer of mist behind. At noon, a foreign guest hurriedly dragged his suitcase out, stammering, "There, someone? In the mirror? In the bathroom?" He didn't bother to reclaim his deposit, insisting on leaving the hotel immediately. That night, the corridors became strange and unnerving. The flickering fluorescent lights blinked as if someone were controlling them. Lucy, still not fully recovered from witnessing what happened in room 407, shivered beside me during the night shift. Around 3 in the morning, children's laughter echoed from all directions. Not just one voice, but many, as if a group of children were playing somewhere unseen. Tiny footsteps clattered across the stairs. Running around the lobby, Lucy clutched my arm, her voice trembling. "Oh my God, it's not just one. There's more than one ghost here." I tried to steady myself, but every hair on my neck stood on end. Suddenly, the entire hotel lost power. Thick darkness swallowed everything. Only the dim flicker of a few emergency candles on the front desk remained. In that darkness, I heard relentless knocking on doors all along the corridor. Knock, knock, knock. Sometimes fast and frantic, sometimes slow, like a horrifying, chaotic rhythm. I shouted for James, but only silence answered. It felt as if he had disappeared along with the door of room 407 the night before. Then, at the far end of the corridor, the silhouette of a little girl appeared again. This time, I saw clearly. Long hair obscuring half of her face. Bare feet gliding over the cold floor. Her body seemed not to touch the ground at all. She stopped in front of the front desk and looked up at me. In that brief moment, I realized her eyes were exactly like James's. Before I could react, all the candles went out. The space plunged into absolute darkness. Amid that darkness, a child's whisper echoed right by my ear. "Don't trust him," I screamed. When the lights flickered back on, Lucy had collapsed to the floor. Unconscious, I stood frozen, my entire body chilled, heart pounding. The hotel was no longer a refuge for the living. It had become a playground for ghosts. And I knew with certainty, James was the key to unraveling it all. But where was James? Alive, or already merged into the darkness that now consumed the hotel? After that haunting night, I knew I couldn't just sit and wait for the horrors to keep coming. If I didn't find the answer, this hotel would soon become a common grave for everyone. I decided to enter the archive, a dusty room in the basement, holding construction records and hotel documents from when it was still an old mansion. The door creaked open, the musty smell hitting me immediately. Under the flashlight's beam, stacks of old, dust-covered files appeared. I rummaged through each bundle, hoping to find a clue. Finally, in an iron drawer, I discovered a file marked in red, wrinkled and torn at the corners. On the cover was only Incident 1989 Top Secret. I trembled as I opened it. Inside were clippings from old newspapers, black and white photographs, and police reports. All spoke of a series of children disappearing from this mansion when it had been a private orphanage. The media at the time vaguely reported that at least 7 children vanished within 3 months. But the internal records revealed a far more terrifying truth. The orphanage manager was suspected of abusing and imprisoning children in a hidden basement. The missing children were never found. The case was covered up due to influential people behind it. On one page of the report, I froze when I saw a sketch of one of the missing girls. That face was identical to the ghost I had seen in the mirror. Suddenly, behind me came a soft sound, like someone descending the basement stairs. I spun around. In the dim light, James stood there. His eyes were weary, his face pale, and his lips cracked. But what chilled me most were his eyes, pitch black, with no whites left. "You found it," James said in a hoarse voice. "The children, they call for me. Not just my sister, all of them want to escape." I stepped back, gripping the file tightly. "James, are you still yourself?" I asked, voice trembling. James smiled, a pale smile devoid of any warmth. They need a guide, and, perhaps I have been chosen. At that moment, the flashlight in my hand went out. The basement plunged into darkness. From the walls, the ceiling, from all around me, overlapping whispers rose. Don't trust him. Don't trust him. I screamed and bolted. As I rushed out of the basement, I glanced back, just in time to see James standing motionless in the shadows, surrounded by tiny hands reaching out from the void, clutching at him. After escaping the basement, I collapsed onto the lobby floor, cold sweat pouring off me as if I had been swimming in a storm. The file was still in my hands, its pages trembling as if about to crumble. I no longer knew whether to trust James or the warning voices. Lucy rushed over, worried. Are you okay? I heard screaming from the basement. I just shook my head, unable to explain. One thing was certain. James was no longer the same. That night, I couldn't sleep. Near dawn, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, James was standing there. His eyes were still pitch black, but different from before. Deep within them, I saw faint, flickering glimmers, as if countless tiny eyes were peering through him. They want to speak to you, James whispered. They won't harm you if you listen to them. Before I could react, James stepped into the room. The temperature dropped abruptly, his breath forming visible mist. The nightlight flickered and then went out completely. In the dim darkness, children's voices echoed from James's throat, not one, but many voices intertwined. We were left, in the basement. We cannot escape. Help us. Reclaim our names. My heart tightened. This was no longer just James, but a host of spirits using his body to convey their message. I shakily opened the file. Indeed, many pages listed the names of the missing children, though most had been crossed out. It seemed someone had intentionally concealed them. I read aloud a few of the remaining names. Each time I spoke a name, James flinched, and the children's cries echoed from his throat, brief but filled with anguish. Lucy turned pale, clutching the armrest. Oh God, they want to be called, so they won't vanish forever. But just as I was about to read the last name in the file, James suddenly screamed. His eyes rolled back, his body writhing as if torn from the inside. Amid the ear-piercing scream, another voice rang out, deep, forceful, no longer a child's. Stop, they belong to me. The entire room shook, windows burst open, and cold wind swept in, scattering papers in chaotic frenzy. James collapsed to the floor, gasping. When he looked up, his eyes had returned to normal, but his face was filled with utter confusion. Do you see? James grabbed my hand. It's not just the children. There's something else, a greater spirit, imprisoning them. I froze. All of this tragedy was not simply about missing children. In the basement, the next day, James and I were nearly exhausted after a night struggling with the spirit's voices. Yet instead of fleeing, we decided to return to the underground basement, the place where all the truths had been buried. Lucy initially protested, but she eventually came with us. If we don't end this, none of us will leave this hotel alive, she said, her voice unusually firm. The basement door creaked open, the metallic screech cutting through the heavy, suffocating air below. I shone my flashlight and, this time, saw the strange markings on the walls more clearly, charcoal scribbles in overlapping circles, with symbols that resembled nothing like letters. James froze. Last night, they whispered in my head, these symbols are the binding marks. Lucy shivered. So someone deliberately trapped the children's souls here? We went deeper. At the end of the hallway, behind a decayed section of wall, there was a welded iron door. I pried it open with a crowbar. Rusted iron fragments gave way, and the stench of death hit me instantly. Inside was a narrow chamber. On the floor were tiny rusted shackles, bent in places as if violently pulled. I choked. This had to be where the children had been imprisoned. In a corner, I found an old, nearly rotten notebook. The pages were torn and smeared, yet a few passages remained legible. The experiment must continue. The children are merely tools. Tonight, I hear them cry, but it is not fear. They are about to open the door for me. Scrawled at the bottom, the master. James clenched his fists, sweat pouring down. This isn't just some villain torturing children. This is a ritual. Someone sacrificed these children to summon something. Suddenly, Lucy's flashlight flickered and went out. In the dense darkness, the air thickened. I heard heavy, slow footsteps dragging from the end of the hallway. A cold gust swept past. I turned, and James's flashlight flickered briefly, illuminating a tall figure cloaked in black. Face obscured, only eyes glowing red like embers. James crumpled to his knees, clutching his head, voice strained. It's him. He's the one holding the children. The apparition drew nearer, silent, but hundreds of children's voices echoed around us, overlapping, wailing. Master, Master, set us free? Lucy trembled, clutching my arm. No, it can't be. He still exists? The spirit raised a hand toward James. The entire basement shuddered. The symbols on the walls suddenly blazed bright, as if reactivating. James straightened, eyes pitch black, voice no longer his own. If someone must keep the promise, I will be the intermediary. But the children must be freed. The spirit hesitated, swirling shadows coiled around James, as if trying to engulf him. Lucy and I screamed, trying to pull him back, but his feet were rooted to the floor, held by some invisible force. In that final moment, James turned to me. A fleeting glimmer of humanity shone in his eyes. Trust me, no matter what happens, you must continue. Don't let them disappear again. And then, the entire basement plunged into darkness. James's scream echoed, swallowed by the shadows. When the flashlight came back, James was gone. Only Lucy and I remained, trembling in the chamber, surrounded by darkness that whispered and writhed like an unfinished nightmare. The underground chamber was silent. Only the ragged breathing of Lucy and me echoed through the void. James had vanished. I collapsed onto the cold stone floor, my entire body numb. Lucy was still trembling, eyes wide in shock, staring at the dark space where he had just stood. No way. Has he really disappeared? Lucy choked out. Before I could answer, the entire basement shuddered again. The glowing symbols on the walls gradually faded, revealing blackened scorch marks, as if burned by some infernal fire. From the darkness, a familiar figure slowly emerged. James. But he was no longer the James we knew. His face was pale, eyes shrouded in a milky haze. The skin on his left arm was mottled, as if being consumed by shadow. Every step he took produced a metallic screech, as though invisible chains dragged him along. Lucy screamed and stepped back. James, my God, what's happening to you? He stopped, staring directly at us. His lips moved, voice twisted and warped, half James, half a cold echo from another realm. I am still James. But he is inside me. I cannot hold him for long. Immediately, the air thickened. From James's back, tendrils of shadow surged, twisting into a demonic face with eyes blazing red. It was the Master. His voice boomed, resonating through the basement. You dare trespass in my sacred domain? The children are forever mine. And now, James is, too. James shrieked, struggling, clutching his head as if trying to tear the darkness from his body. He turned to me, eyes pleading. Don't trust him. If I become that, end me. Don't let him use me as a tool. The basement walls cracked and crumbled, chunks of brick falling. Emaciated children's hands began to reach out from the ground, grasping our legs. Distorted, ghastly childlike laughter echoed everywhere. Lucy sobbed, slapping her hands off and screaming. They're not real. It's just an illusion. He's creating them. But the icy grip on our skin was real. The skeletal fingers dug in hard enough to draw blood. James roared, his body shaking violently. For a fleeting moment, he pushed back the darkness clinging to him. He yelled toward us. There's a way. Destroy the marks on the wall. Hurry, before he takes me completely. Lucy and I lunged forward, using anything at hand, iron rods, broken stones, to smash the engraved symbols on the walls. Each time a mark shattered, anguished screams echoed, and the shadow around James receded slightly. But at the same time, the Master's apparition screamed furiously, tightening its grip on James. Blood began to seep from his mouth, eyes rolling back. He rasped a harsh laugh, gasping for breath, yet managed to say, "Keep going, don't stop." Even if I'm gone, free the children. As we destroyed almost all the symbols, the basement shook violently, as if the entire hotel was about to collapse. James fell to his knees, trembling, shadow enveloping nearly his entire body. In that moment, I clearly saw two sets of eyes, one James, determined, the other, the master's red, vengeful glare. Lucy grabbed my hand, screaming, "What do we do now? If we keep going, James may never come back." I froze, heart torn in two. One side was the chance to free the children's spirits, the other, the risk of losing James forever. And at that exact moment, James lifted his head, wearing a strange smile, half in pain, half in serenity. The time has come to choose. The last symbols on the wall shattered. A deafening explosion echoed, and a blinding white light flooded the basement. Lucy and I collapsed to the ground, ears ringing, eyes stinging. In that moment, I thought it was all over. But as the light faded, before me stood James, still alive. He sank to his knees, body exhausted, breath ragged, yet I immediately noticed the darkness had not entirely vanished. It clung to him, coiling around his body like a thin layer of shadow pressed against his skin. James opened his eyes. One side retained the familiar gaze, steadfast, compassionate, but the other, murky, glowing with a cold red hue. Lucy rushed forward. "James, you're okay, right? You've won." James shook his head slightly, his hoarse, deep voice resonating, partly him, partly something else. "No, I am no longer myself. The master has been sealed, but his darkness will forever remain within me." James stood, each heavy step echoing through the empty basement. The children's hands had vanished. The eerie laughter was gone. Silence slowly returned to the space. He turned to us, offering a painful smile. "I kept my promise, the children are free. But the price is that I must remain bound to this place." I choked back my words. "No, we'll find a way to save you. To get you out of here." James shook his head. From his hands, shadows dripped, twisting like chains before sinking back into his flesh. "There is no outside for me anymore. I am now a part of this hotel." Lucy burst into tears, clutching him tightly, but touching his cold, shadowed flesh made her shiver, and she had to let go. James gently brushed the tears from her cheeks. "Don't cry. At least, I still have a bit of humanity left to say goodbye." James stepped back, the darkness gradually enveloping him, merging him into the darkened walls. His voice echoed, distant. "From now on, I will be the keeper. I will guard this place, so that no soul is ever exploited again. And no one dies unjustly in room 407. Lucy and I could only watch. His eyes slowly dimmed into the shadows until only the cold walls remained. A gust of wind swept through the hotel corridor, carrying a whisper. "Do not return. This place is not for the living." We escaped outside, leaving the hotel as the first light of dawn appeared. The old building still stood silently, as if nothing had ever happened. But in the darkened windows, I swore I saw a figure silently watching us. James. Neither ghost nor human. A new entity, forever bound within the hotel's eternal cycle. And I knew, anyone who steps into room 407 from now on will no longer be haunted by the children's spirits. But instead, they will encounter the keeper. Many years have passed since that horrifying night. Lucy and I tried to return to normal life. But the memories of the old hotel still haunt us, never letting go, not for a single day. Occasionally, small news items would appear in the local papers, mostly ignored by the public. Tourist mysteriously disappears in abandoned hotel. Passers-by hear the sound of children crying from the fourth-floor windows. A witness claims to have seen a man standing silently in room 407. No one knows the full truth, but these stories gradually spread, becoming whispered rumors from one person to another. They say that if you walk past the hotel at midnight and look up at the fourth floor, sometimes you can see a figure standing by the window, eyes empty, yet carrying a profound sadness. Some swear they hear whispers drifting from there. Go. This place is not for the living. Thank you for watching and listening. See you next time in the next story.